with my coffee. My skin is looking stunning today, if I do say so myself. I'm gonna show you guys the outfit that I'm wearing to work from home, and then we're gonna get into the topic of this video. I haven't done one of these in a while. I've been wanting to do an update of kind of like where I am professionally, because I've been talking about it a lot on this channel historically. Like when I first was, I think, a regulatory affairs specialist, and then I talked about when I became a manager and an associate director, and now I am at the director level. I'm gonna talk about some of the stuff that I've been doing throughout my consulting, and then how to get into regulatory at this point in time. I've been talking about regulatory for a while. So I'm gonna give you guys the tea, some updates on kind of the landscape in the industry, and also what's happening with the current administration and how that impacts your ability to find opportunities in regulatory, and also what that means for me. So yeah, but first, let's see my outfit. Again, it's a messy, just a bit, but these shorts are from Ray. I love a pair of cargo shorts. It is raining in LA, but who cares? I'm in my house anyway. If I were to leave, I'd put on a trench coat, my Frankie Shop trench coat that's the same color as this, and I'm wearing my Jimmy Choo burgundy low heels. This striped top is from Pos the Label, and then this button down is from Savannah Morrow. I wear it all the time, but I just felt like this was cute. And then regular jewelry, engagement ring, stuff like that. Yeah, very chill in the house fit, and we love that. Anyway, where do I even start? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I decided after I had my double jaw surgery that I would want to go independent. I wanted to start doing regulatory consulting myself. I've talked about that a lot. I've made a couple videos on this topic. If you have more specific questions, leave comments on this video and I will try to make a response video to those questions. But I've talked about contracting and how I find most of my contracts on LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, or from recruiters that I've had relationships with throughout the years. At this point, I'm not applying to contract. It's really just relationships that I've built with people throughout the years who now come to me and say, hey, I have this contract. Do you have like 10, 20 hours a week to give, whatever. Not taking the 20s, but that's okay. Yeah, and then I've had other contracts come from like previous coworkers who are like, hey, I need your support with this regulatory thing. Can you help me? This, that, and the third. Some of the contracts that I had, I was doing stuff that was at like the associate director level, the director level. There was a period of time, like 6 months, where there was no VP of regulatory, and I kind of assumed those roles and responsibility until they brought on a new regulatory person. So under my LLC, my regulatory consulting LLC, I'm able to say that I've had to make executive level decisions, or that I've had to step into the role of a VP or a head of regulatory, so to speak. I don't necessarily want that responsibility, but I think it was really great exposure for me. And that's why I'm such an advocate of working contracts, because it gives you really great opportunities and insights. So what am I doing right now? I am currently a director of global regulatory affairs. I love it. I love where I am professionally. I did not apply to this job that I got, as I haven't for probably the past like 2 or 3 jobs that I've had. I haven't really had to apply. It's kind of just been brought to me, and then I had the opportunity to interview, and I was of course given the role because my qualifications speak for that. Now, something that I see a lot on Instagram and TikTok, and this has kind of been the same since I've been talking about regulatory, is a lot of people are telling me it is so hard to find a job in regulatory, especially entry level. And I have to say that it has gotten exceedingly hard over the past 3 to 5 years. Before, it was easier. I used to tell people all the time, I started out as a pharmacy technician. I was doing my little work at CVS, working at Milford Hospital, that's now Yale University Hospital. And I just got reached out by a recruiter, and they were like, hey, we think you'd be great for this regulatory job because of your pharmaceutical background and your bachelor's of science in pre-medical biology. So I said, hey, why not? I took the job, I worked there, and from then on, I never had an issue finding a job in regulatory. It was very seamless for me. When the recruiters were assessing my resume at that time, they really held on to my 3 years of experience working as a pharmacy technician. So that's why I always tell people it's important, if you're in college or grad school, that you need to find some sort of job that is relevant to the industry. I think the issue is most people don't know what jobs to find that are relevant to the industry. I wouldn't necessarily say a pharmaceutical technician is going to get you the job every time, but working for a patient advocacy group could get you opportunities or exposure, because patient advocacy groups, depending on the indication or the disease state that you're interested in or that advocacy group focuses on, they work with pharmaceutical companies all the time for their phase 4 studies, even for their phase 2, phase 3 studies, to make sure the design is something that patients can adhere to or that is applicable to that patient population. You can volunteer in those capacities and get exposure. This is probably more for people who like are in college, but post-college, I think the best way, like I know there's PharmDs out there who are struggling to get jobs. I think at this point, fellowships are gonna be the best bet, because getting a job in regulatory right out of college, right out of your master's program, right out of your PharmD program is a lot more hard and challenging than it used to be years prior. And that's why I wanted to make this updated video to kind of contextualize the reality for everybody. Another reason why I think it's so hard to get into regulatory outside of, more competition, we have a lot more people applying, we have a lot less roles available. I think there's like a business and also just political answer to it. I'm gonna try and not overcomplicate it, but essentially one issue that makes it complex is, right now there's the issue with President Donald Trump and the whole tariffs trade war, right? That makes manufacturing expensive for certain organizations. I don't know if it directly impacts pharmaceutical companies or not, but it could. When things get more expensive to manufacture, you either offset that cost to your consumers, or you as the organization, most of the time still experience some sort of increase in cost, which is at times when you want to stop like over hiring in your labor force or hiring in your labor force if consumption of your product isn't going to be as high. That's just like high level, mostly for CPGs, but it could impact the pharmaceutical industry. That's one. Number two, all the pharma companies out there, there's like 15 big ones. There's 15 major ones, I'm just gonna say. They acquire everybody. So a lot of the smaller organizations and the mid-sized companies, you're gonna see that they're gonna wanna keep their regulatory team small, or just their team small in general, to make sure they have enough money for their clinical operations, because that's the most important part. So you're gonna keep your regulatory team small and beef up, this is for mid-sized and small, and beef up your clinical operations initiatives. And you want to operate lean up until acquisition, because the leaner you are, the more money you make. The less people you have to share the pots of the pie with, the more you are able to have. That's most of the time how startups work before they get acquired. You don't want to have more people than you need. So the small and mid-sized companies, the regulatory teams are very lean, very small. In the past 2 years, the regulatory teams that I have worked on, we have been no more than 3 people. And some of them have been no more than 2 people, including me. The mid-sized ones are gonna have a bit more regulatory people, and the massive ones are gonna have like a lot of regulatory people. But for the massive ones, I do find that a lot of them partner with specific like institutions. Like there was a pharmaceutical company I worked for that partnered with Rutgers University and their PharmD program, or their PharmD students. I know AbbVie does a lot of relationships with different universities, and they'll pull students from those fellowship programs, from those PharmD programs, to come into those various roles and opportunities. And they may not start in regulatory, but they will graduate into regulatory. So the roles that outside people are trying to apply to, they're already filled or allocated for different people and positions. The other thing I'm noticing about regulatory is it's no longer a place where you start. Yes, technically, after I graduated college, the first job I had in the corporate world was regulatory affairs. Like I honestly, at this point, I'm gonna say it's luck and just good timing, because I graduated college in 2016, almost 10 years ago. So it's completely different from the landscape that we're looking at right now. Regulatory is one of those functions in clinical research and development, the landscape, where you had experience somewhere else before. And even back then, 10 years ago, it kind of still was like that, because if I didn't have that pharmacy tech experience, they wouldn't have hired me. Like, let's keep it a buck. Even my coworkers who I worked with, they came from the lab. They were working in the lab, and that's what I'm seeing more of now, is the people who are getting the jobs are the people who were in the lab for like 2 to 3 years, or the people who worked at patient advocacy organizations, partnered with that pharmaceutical company, or you just know somebody. It's like a connection, like your parents work in biotech and pharma, and they're able to help you get an opportunity in the industry. I'm seeing a lot of that now. So I think if you're trying to get into regulatory and it's still something you're really passionate about, and it's a profession that you want to engulf yourself in, you have to start somewhere else. You got to. And there's so many other functions. Like I've already said the lab, obviously. I've already said clinical operations. You could do CRC, CRA, assistant, clinical research coordinator. You could volunteer or try and find some sort of internship opportunity. And sometimes, the internship may not exist. You might have to just reach out to a lot of these small and mid-sized pharma companies and be like, hey, I just graduated, or I'm a PharmD looking for opportunities. I'm willing to help in any way I can. These are my capabilities. This is how I feel like I can help your organization, and hope that one of them respond. That's how I got one of my internships that I talked about in my book, The Prepared Graduate. I just walked into the doctor's office and asked if I could be their intern. And this was after like a week or weeks of searching for internship opportunities, literally on foot, going into offices to find one. So you might have to virtually email or call these different organizations to see how you can leverage your skill set into their organization. Other functions that you could consider is quality assurance. I talk a lot lot about that. That's something that people say is boring, but you gotta start somewhere to get to where you wanna be. Working at a CRO, I'm hearing CROs now are saying they want a minimum of like 2 years of experience, and they're being a little bit more strict on training like people with no experience at all. That's what I'm saying. You gotta get in the lab, get a research assistant position. That's something that you will be able to leverage on your resume or in conversation to get into biotech and pharma. The other thing I really wanna highlight is there's levels to regulatory. As in, it's not only regulatory for drugs, like there's regulation of cosmetics, there's regulation of medical devices. And I honestly think you'll have a better bet outside of drug. Drug is far more complex, like small molecule, large molecule, when I'm saying biologic or like a tablet capsule. I feel like that's a lot harder to get into than medical device or cosmetics. I don't think there's a lot of cosmetic roles, but I do think that there might be less people applying to those opportunities. So you should start in those different areas first. There's also a lot of technology companies that are trying to expand into regulatory, different services. I don't want to say like, I can't even think of it, but there's someone who mentioned to me that there's like different regulatory tools where companies are trying to like summarize guidances and like sell them to organizations. Essentially, you can go work for a regulatory intelligence company if you want to get into regulatory. And essentially that's just reading guidances, but it'll give you the exposure to the regulations and you'll be able to leverage it for a different opportunity. There's pharmacovigilance, drug safety. You can go work for a vendor that helps sponsors manage their drug safety throughout clinical studies. That's another really great opportunity. You can just literally search drug safety associate. That's a role. On my TikTok, I've created so many lists of jobs for biotech and pharma. So many. If you go on my stan.store, stan.store.com/kyyahabdul, whatever, I have a list of jobs for biology majors. And I think also, there's a couple, I did like 5 or 7 majors. It's $1. If you purchase it for $1, you get a list of all the job titles. And the reason why I had to charge $1 is because it gets sent to your email, and people were using fake emails, and I was getting responses back saying like, someone's using my email for this. So that's why I had to charge $1 for it. I also have a I just got laid off kit, which is $1. And it gives you a bunch of different job titles like project management, software engineer, product manager, and how you can leverage your experience into different functions. I know that's not the purpose of this video, but if you're interested in regulatory and you do have a science background, you can look at the biology job titles that I have given, and also other science job titles I have given, and apply to those for an opportunity to gain experience in biotech and pharma or a space that's regulated, and leverage that for an opportunity to branch into regulatory affairs. If you want it bad enough, it is possible. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh no, nobody can get into regulatory because it's so challenging. You gotta have 5 to 10 years of experience first. Not true. It's not. And I know some people, who have only worked for a year and were able to get a job in regulatory. I get emails all the time from people saying, thank you for your guidance on X, Y, and Z from your YouTube video or from your TikTok or from your Instagram, because based on what you said, I was able to get a job at this company or that company. Contract jobs are gonna be really good because they don't pay as close attention to the requirements. They're not gonna be as strict because they're not investing in you. They're just hiring you literally to execute on whatever task that they need. I'm not gonna talk about contracts here, but there are regulatory contracts out there because I still get emails for so many entry-level regulatory roles. CMC, medical writing, those are 2 other functions where I see a lot of opportunities for people who wanna get into regulatory or get into biotech or pharma. Now, the last thing that I wanna talk about in this video is the new administration. I didn't wanna go too in detail because it's been less than a month of Donald Trump being president and his administration taking over. And I don't believe that the FDA commissioner, Dr. Markey of Johns Hopkins, has testified before the Senate for his position yet that he's been, submitted for. So I didn't want to speak to it too much, but whenever a president comes in, whenever there's a new administration, it shakes things up. And it's part of my job to kind of assess the political landscape and understand how that will impact my organization and how I can best advise my organization to navigate this new landscape. I think I said it in another video. I'm not too sure at this point, I'm forgetting. But for example, I've talked about on ilanahealth.io, the FDA's diversity plan and how they want sponsors to, put forth an initiative to kind of diversify their clinical trials, right? That's no longer required. Why is it no longer required? Because it it wasn't finalized, the guidance wasn't finalized before this new administration came in and put forth an executive order halting diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives, which includes this diversity action plan that, you know, Congress tried to make happen. So right now, companies technically, they don't have to do it. They don't have to. It's not required. It was supposed to, but it's not because of this executive order. That doesn't mean that companies aren't gonna do it. But my job in regulatory is to give my organizations the information and say, this was something that we were required to do. We don't have to do it anymore. However, X, Y, and Z, or we don't have to do it anymore, period. That's my job as regulatory. So I think for people who are trying to learn a little bit more about what people do in regulatory on a day-to-day basis, that is part of it. And I do think that every 4 years, your job gets a little bit more, not complex, but you just have to pay closer attention to what's happening within the political landscape and how that impacts the FDA. And once the FDA gets a new commissioner, there's always different agendas, and not in a bad way, but every commissioner is gonna have something that they really wanna push forward, whether it's getting more rare disease drugs approved, or obviously within the proper scope of what is required to get an NDA or a BLA approved. But who knows? I don't know. We have to wait and kind of see what their goals are going to be, or what the goals of this administration is going to be as it relates to public health, and for me specifically as it relates to the development of biologics and new drugs within biotech and pharma. For me, I feel like the past 2 years I've been reading and writing a lot. I've written so much this past 2 years, and it's mainly because when you work at smaller organizations and there's no medical writer, you kind of just have to jump in and write the documents yourself. Not necessarily protocols, because that's definitely not my wheelhouse. More so like requests for certain designations that the FDA or whatever health authority, because even like I had to do some stuff for Europe, like an orphan drug application where you're trying to get an orphan drug designation, which just means it's an ultra rare disease. It doesn't affect a lot of people within that region. You're trying to get that approved because there's different benefits that you get from exploring orphan indications. So like expedited review of your applications and like additional interactions with various health authority groups to help you get your program approved. Also, there's like tax benefits and stuff like that, but regulatory is generally responsible for assessing whether or not that strategy makes sense, if there's other designations we need to look into, and there's a lot of new ones. Like the FDA STAR pilot program, not a lot of people have talked about it, but it's very similar to breakthrough therapy designation. Again, it's my job to read into these things and understand how it will affect my programs, how it will be beneficial to my programs. And some of this information gets brought to the boards of companies, because it's like, if we do this, X, Y, and Z, A plus B equals C. So I still like my job. Almost 10 years in, and I still love my job. I find it very interesting. That's partially why I want to go back to law school and kind of get more into the legal aspects of it. I feel like there's still so much uncharted territory with regulatory, and it's an industry that's constantly evolving. I think biotech and pharma is constantly evolving, with AI kind of now starting to make its way into the clinical research and development landscape. I'm really interested in like patient security, like data protection more so. EU GDPR is something that I've been reading into a lot. Just a lot of reading, just soaking up a lot of knowledge and taking that reading and applying it to make the best strategic decisions for the things that I support. So yeah, this was a long video, but I hope you found it helpful. If you're trying to get into regulatory, don't lose hope. If it's something that you're actually very passionate about and you feel like it's the right job for your personality, for your lifestyle, for what you want, for patients, I definitely think still pursue it. I know there's going to be a couple of people that ask me, do I feel like my MPH was necessary to get into regulatory? No, because I was working in regulatory for 3 years before I got my master's. Or by the time I had graduated with my master's, a 1.5-year program, I had been in regulatory for 3 years. So for me, no, I don't think my master's would have made a difference. I think it changed my thinking. It changed my perspective. It changed like how I view a lot of situations. I think it made me smarter, honestly, which is what it should do. It's just broadened my perspective on a lot of topics, and I think I'm able to be a lot more tactful in clin dev. I think it also like made me a better scientist in terms of asking the right questions to address your population. Even though public health technically is like a social science, not an actual like biological or chemistry or physical science, I still think that it's been of value to me. Do I have to go and get my JD to remain relevant in regulatory? No, I don't have to do anything. I can continue remaining where I am. And actually, oh my gosh, my fiance said something so profound the other day. He was like, everybody plateaus at a different point. Like everyone plateaus at a different point. Some people plateau, and I'm just gonna use job titles, for example, at manager, and they're happy there. Some people plateau at VP and they're happy there. Some people plateau at CEO and they're happy there. I think right now, I'm really loving this plateau at director. I'm really loving it. That's not to say that I wouldn't want to go and do VP. I don't know. But right now I'm really loving this plateau. And in this plateau, it gives me the ability to do other things like film this video or apply to law school. So I don't know what the purpose of me saying that was, but it's just to say that I'm giving you guys like a little checkpoint, a little pulse check on how I feel professionally. And I love my job. I'm going to keep doing my job. I don't want to quit my job. I have no feelings about it. I think it's a great profession where you're able to earn a very good income, live a great life, and also help patients. So yeah, if you have any specific questions, you can leave them down below. As you know, I like to answer in response with like videos. So yeah, I hope you guys found this helpful. I didn't even drink my coffee. I was chatting it up. That's how you know I love my job. Bye.